For those of you who do not know, Ephrem the Syrian, he was born in Nisibis in 306. And Nisibis is located in southeast of Turkey. It's on the border to Syria, and you can actually see the border of Syria from Nisibis if you stand there. And he was born in 306, and he was, in the later tradition, he's considered to be one of the great church fathers of the Syriac tradition, who was spread and he's read also widely outside of the Syriac tradition. And he is considered to be one of the main defenders of the Nicene faith in southeast of Turkey, in those parts of where he was actually active. And one of the big things, one of the important things, and one of the things that he's famous for in the reception of Ephrem the Syrian is actually his theological approach, where poetry was essential for him. His writing consists of a variety of different kinds of writings, teaching hymns, madroshe, and also poetic texts that were used in the liturgy during his lifetime and also after his lifetime. It's debated whether his texts were sung during his lifetime or not, but probably they were. And Ephrem, just to say just a few more things about his life, he actually was, he experienced a lot of difficulties. So in light of the difficulties that he experienced, it's also quite interesting that he focused on beauty so much in his text. He had to move. He was dislocated from Nisibis, the town where he was born, had to leave to Amida, so to the Diyarbakir, when he was around 50 years old, and then had to relocate again to Edessa, so to today's Turkey's Urfa, Wasanli Urfa in Turkey today, for various reasons, and encountered a lot of difficulties in his life and conflicts and so on. One of the main things that he did, Ephrem did, that he rejected those who thought they could investigate and define divinity. This is his critique of those of Arian theology. Namely, he said that it's a categorical error to try to define divinity, and he writes a lot on his teaching hymns about this concern. This is a theme that recurs over and over again. For example, in his hymn on faith, 3:4, he says, "Blessed is the one who knew, Lord, that your greatness cannot be scrutinized, and reproached a bit his tongue to honor your son in silence." So Ephrem was more concerned. He was a poet who was more concerned with beauty than he was with definition and analytical thought. He approached theology as one would approach any kind of art, you could say. So for Ephrem, the transcendence of the divine and the ontological gap between divinity and creation was a necessary foundation in order for him to be able to see beauty as something beyond this world. So beauty was which breaks through creation, and we get glimpses of it through creation. And ultimately, beauty is a category of the divine for Ephrem. And he says, for example, also in Hymn on Faith 69, verses 11 to 13, "In the case of the Godhead, what created being is able to investigate him? For there is a great chasm between him and the Creator. In the case of the Godhead, it is not that he is distant from his possessions, for there exists love between him and creation. None of those who try to investigate God has ever drawn near to him, yet he is extremely close to those who have discernment." So, therefore, for him, the starting point of a person's journey to faith, which is ultimately what he was concerned about, was being struck by awe and wonder. In his own words, he says this. This is also a hymn on faith, hymn on faith number 4, verse 11. "You are entirely a source of amazement. From whatever side we may seek you, you are close at hand, yet distant. Who shall reach you? Searching is quite unable to extend its reach to you. When it is fully extended, trying to attain to you, then it is cut off and stops short, being too short to reach your mountain, but faith gets there, and so does love with prayer. So let's look at this more closely, this particular verse. There are certain words here that are important and fundamental for Ephrem's thought, I think. Number one, God is a source of amazement, and the Syriac word that he uses here is tehero. So for Ephrem, this insight is the first step or first stepping stone to faith, namely amazement. God is only available to man due to the incarnation in his thinking, the fact that God bends himself down to creation. So for him, it becomes a source of amazement, of tehran, this fact, that God bends himself to creation. The consequence of the incarnation is that God is ever present in the creation without being limited by it. According to Ephrem, it's a lack of sense of wonder that leads to this prying of the divinity. And this is what he accuses those, Arian theologians to try to do. I thought early on when I encountered this thinking, because this is a theme that recurs in Ephrem all the time in many places, where he rejects those who try to pry and uses specific Syriac words, pso, for example, to talk about this prying. In my early reading of Ephrem, I thought that he rejected those who actually, there was a good way to, when he puts it this way, it was a good way actually to silence those who do not agree with him. This may be a consequence that he's silencing those who don't agree with him, but again, Ephrem himself talks about the ontological gap between God and creation, and is himself a defender of the Nicene Creed. So when the Nicene Creed, which actually promulgates that the Son is of the same ousia as the Father and therefore truly God, so it does not seem to at least be rejecting theological thinking in itself, so the analytical kind of thinking. So he's not only a theologian of poetry, but he thinks it's also very important to do theology in a more analytical way. But it seems, though, to me that his concern is rather the focus and emphasis, namely, if you put it this way, let's allow ourselves to be immersed by a sense of wonder as we approach life and recognize the beauty in it, and furthermore recognize that the beauty of everyday life is fleeting and transcendent. Ephrem lived, as I said before, through several life crises, one has to remember, and he was born in Nisibis, but he had to leave Nisibis due to an agreement between the Persian and Roman empires, and move first to Amida, Diyarbakir, and then finally to Edessa, to Sanliurfa. And according to his biography, he seems to have died ministering to the sick. In the midst of the ugliness of life, does then beauty and poetry matter? Well, if we for a second leave Ephrem and quote C.S. Lewis in this sense, I think we might say something about Ephrem and about all of us, I guess. In The Weight of Glory, C.S. Lewis, he writes the following: human life has always been lived on the edge of a precipice. Human culture has always had to exist under the shadow of something infinitely more important than itself. If men had postponed the search for knowledge and beauty until they were secure, the search would have never begun. We are mistaken when we compare war with normal life. Life has never been normal. So Ephrem also lived through war, plague, and dispute, yet in the midst of all this, it seems that beauty, wonder, and awe were extremely important to him and a gateway to faith and love. Another thing that I think it's also talking to this is another quote by C.S. Lewis, who says, "Our commonest expedient is to call the longing beauty and behave as if that had settled the matter, but the books or the music in which we thought the beauty was located will betray us if we trust to them. It was not in them, it only came through them. And what came through them was longing. These things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, are good images of what we really desire. But if they are mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshippers. For they are not the thing itself, they are only scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited." It's very different, but at the same time similar thematics that you can find in Ephrem. So for Ephrem, it starts with awe and it starts with wonder, which leads to faith and love. Faith and love together form the luminous eye, which for Ephrem is basically the ability to discern and keep this sense of awe and wonder alive, since it is the beginning of human beings' relationship to the divine and therefore opens up our heart to life. So it starts with awe and wonder. This is available to everybody, regardless of faith. And for Ephrem, the next step is to identify the evanescence of beauty with faith, an attitude to life that is due to the incarnation for him. And this that we approach is always different and other and beyond what we can understand, even if we try. Number 3, love. The universe is beautiful, life is ugly, yet in the face of its ugliness, the proper response is love. Love springs from the openness to life, the experience that we are somehow connected. And for Ephrem, the bending down of divinity is the bond which brings everything together. And then finally, Ephrem adds in this prayer, or in this hymn that I actually quoted above, prayer is important, it seems. So, and prayer is not necessarily verbalization. And even when it is, Ephrem's hymns were sung, as I said, probably used in the liturgical setting in his own lifetime, and certainly later on, not only in the Syriac tradition, but also beyond it. So prayer, it seems, feeds this sense of awe in his understanding. It feeds this attitude of openness to the beauty in the midst of the ugliness of life. So Ephrem seems to incarnate what has recently been developed into the science of awe within the field of psychology. Let me therefore end with one of the leading scholars in this field, namely the science of awe, by Deicher Keltner, who says, awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. So the sense of awe, openness, encountering this beauty, it seems then changes your entire, it strikes you and it changes your entire life almost, but at least your understanding, I believe. So thank you.